And the breaking news this morning, a major breakthrough in the trade war between the United States and China. The two sides making a surprise announcement after a weekend of talks in Switzerland under the agreement unveiled by the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. For 90 days, the U.S. is going to cut its tariffs on Chinese goods from 145% down to 30%. And China will cut its levies on U.S. imports from 125% to 10%. During these 90 days, then, the countries say that the negotiations continue. Globally, markets are cheering the news. U.S. stock futures, we'll take a look at that, way up ahead of the opening bell on Wall Street after weeks of wild volatility that we've all been experiencing and covering over President Trump's tariffs, which have disrupted supply chains and raised recession fears. President Trump will likely be asked about all of this when he signs an executive order later this morning that he says will be to lower prescription drug prices. Let's get over to the White House right now. CNN's Elena Treen is standing by. Break all of this down for us right now as we know it so far, Elena.
Okay, I mean, this is a major breakthrough between the United States and China following these talks in Geneva this weekend. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, announced in a 3 a.m. press conference that both countries have agreed to dramatically scale back these tariffs for at least 90 days. Now, we're expected to see these tariffs be rolled back starting May 14th. That's just 2 days from now. And I want to reiterate how you laid this out. So essentially, the United States is going to temporarily lower its overall tariffs on Chinese goods from 145% to 30%, while China is going to roll back its tariffs on American imports from 125% to 10%. And Kate, I cannot overstate enough how big of a change this is, particularly from a White House that has really tried to make China the key part of this broader tariff policy that the president has put forth. Despite having lowered tariffs on all other countries, really, China has been increasingly the one country that they wanted to kind of make an example out of. And just days ago, I'd remind you that the president was saying continuing this trade war with China was good policy because it essentially meant the United States wasn't losing money to Beijing. Now, I think, just taking into all of this into account is even more notable when you recognize that this weekend, the talks in Geneva between the United States and China were the first time the two sides really got together and actually talked about this, not even just face to face, but even over the phone to hash out some of these details and try to find some sort of off-ramp to the escalating trade war. Now, already, Kate, we are hearing from this administration much friendlier rhetoric toward China, much more positive and optimistic view of how we're going to be moving forward in a United States-Chinese relationship. And Scott Bessent kind of highlighted that during the press conference when he said that neither country wants a decoupling. Listen to how he put it.
The consensus from both delegations this weekend is neither side wants a decoupling. And what had occurred with these very high tariffs, as Ambassador Greer said, was the equivalent of an embargo, and neither side wants that.
Now, Kate, as you mentioned, we're already seeing global markets kind of buoyed by this news, and there's no doubt that the president and this White House are going to spin this deal as a major win for them. But again, I just want to highlight how big of a deal this is and how much of a change in posture this is from the Trump administration, particularly, again, given their repeated insistence on needing to hold China accountable. Now, and I also think, just to make clear, that the inflationary reaction we've seen to some of the president's tariff policies, particularly as it relates to China, and also, the economic concerns overall, the impact of his tariffs on the markets, that definitely played a role in all of this. Kate?
Yeah. Elena, thank you very much. Much more to learn about all of this morning still. Sarah?
All right. The agreement between the U.S. and China, of course, having a ripple effect, as you just heard mentioned, around the world. The markets in Asia surging on the news. CNN's Mark Stewart joining us now from Beijing. I'm just curious about this because what you're hearing from one side here in the United States is that this was a major win, a major agreement, but there's a huge capitulation on the part of the United States here. How did this agreement come together so quickly?
Well, Sarah, I think a big part of it is just necessity, because look at the economic upheaval it's caused around the world. In the United States, there's been a lot of concern about supply chains. Here in China, manufacturing was beginning to take a hit. It doesn't look good when the world's first and second largest economies are fighting with each other. And then this door opened and both sides felt it was ripe for conversation. And as we have seen, markets really like what they are seeing. If we look at the big boards, if we look in the United States at U.S. stock futures, we're seeing gains across the board, including the S&P 500. That's important because that's where so many of our retirement accounts are based upon. And then here in Asia, as you mentioned, big gains as well. We saw the Hang Seng in Hong Kong up by more than 3%. But with all of this so-called celebration, if you will, there is a lot of caution. China's being very measured in its response. It's seeing this very much as a first step. And that's reflected in some of the statements we are hearing from the country's leadership, including China's vice premier. Let's listen to some of his remarks from earlier in Geneva.
We're going to promote new development in the China-US trade and economic relations and inject more certainty and stability into the world economy. China's position towards this trade war has been clear and consistent, and that is, China doesn't want to fight a trade war because trade wars produce no winners. But if the US insists on forcing this war upon us, China will not be afraid of it and will fight to the end.
So perhaps the most important takeaway in all of this is that there is now a vehicle of conversation between these two nations that did not exist before. China wanted to see respect from the United States. This seems to fall in line with those demands, Sarah.
It certainly does. China pointing out that the trade war was begun by Donald Trump. Mark Stewart, thank you so much for all your great reporting there from Beijing.
So even though I gave this description that makes it sound like it's kind of a done deal, the New York Post sets me straight, saying it is a Swiss tease, indicating that they are not fully sold, that this deal is done. But the details are going to come out. Stephen, what are you looking for?
I think this is, the Treasury Secretary is right, it is a reset, but it's a reset from the situation that the President created in the first place. He's going to declare this a big victory because there'll still be a 30% tariff. He believes in tariffs. Tariffs bring in money to the Treasury.
Yeah, and the numbers have been so high that 30% seems low, even though 30% is still really high.
But the question here is 30% tariff sufficient to bring back manufacturing and jobs to the United States that have gone to low-wage economies abroad? Probably not over the long term. Secondly, even if some companies assume the cost of some of those tariffs, if we all end up paying more for Chinese imports, then the consumer is going to be worse off. So you have to ask the question of, has the president simply solved a crisis that he created himself and left us in a worse position? We'll see.
Here's what China signaled over the weekend as the talks seem to be at least making some progress. So they're saying we're going to promote new development in the China-U.S. trade and economic relations and inject more certainty and stability into the world economy. China's position towards the trade war has been clear and consistent, and that is China doesn't want to fight a trade war because trade wars produce no winners. But if the U.S. insists on forcing this war upon us, China will not be afraid and will fight it to the end. So this is the talk coming out of the deal.
Right.
Which is, this is not our fault. We didn't want this. And also, if you keep doing it, we're like ready to go.
We're watching the headlines out of Switzerland over the weekend, the Swiss cheese deal. And it was really interesting to see President Trump suggest, like, this is great progress is being made. And then the comments that you'd see in Chinese state media were like, China will never get into extortion, things like that. So I think we have largely been watching a manufacturing crisis, and now the president taking his foot off of the gas, at least of that. It's a 90-day pause. I don't think, based on what the markets have done and what voters have been saying in polls, that it's a fight that he totally wants to reignite, but it doesn't mean it won't happen. I mean, there's another 3+ years left to this presidency.
Well, you highlighted the key word just before, which was certainty. And the thing is that Trump is trying to restore certainty into the markets, but the problem is, can you put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah, some people are saying the damage is done.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you cannot bring it back. The fact is that people don't know where they can actually buy products right now. And, can you bring manufacturing back from China to the United States? Well, now you're looking at this and you're like, well, there's a 90-day moratorium. And then Howard Lutnick, he definitely speaks Trump's language when it comes to these tariffs. This is exactly sort of the Trump line when it comes to these things. But the idea that that businesses and countries are going to be the ones that just eat the tariff willingly and aren't going to pass on any costs. No serious economist really believes that.
Well, not just that. I've noticed in some of the clips we play over the last couple of months, the average person is saying that now. The average person is saying, well, prices are going to go up. Prices are going to go up. They are not totally bought into this argument. It's not something that's only the elites are saying.
3连关注，点赞也行。